Hi, everybody. How's it going? See some familiar faces. Hey, Angela.
Hi, Matt.
How you doing? All right. Let me get the screen sharing. Emma's with me. All right. Hey, Emma. All righty. Hopefully, y'all can see the PowerPoint. Cool. So today we're going to talk a lot about practical advice for obviously teaching visuals and graphic design. I want to kind of approach this in a kind of twofold aspect. I kind of want to talk a little bit about the theory first. And actually in our pre-meeting, I saw some of my fellow presenters are going to kind of open up their web courses and talk a little bit about, how they use their LMS as well to kind of teach that too. But I think starting with the foundational elements is going to be really important to kind of think about why obviously we're teaching graphic design and what kind of aids we need to kind of develop that. So just to start, a little bit about me. As Hannah mentioned, I'm an associate professor at the University of Central Florida. I teach animation, graphic design. I do creative direction with a company called Limitless Solutions, where we give away cost-free bionics to children with limb difference free of charge. For us, it's really about using visual storytelling and graphic design, animation, video, STEM, STEAM, whatever you want to call it, to empower young children with limb differences and inspire them every day. My ultimate goal is no matter your discipline, I have a strong feeling that we are all creative. And as educators for creativity, this is something that I strive to get across to not only our art students and our graphic design students, but also our engineers and our business students and the students who are in psychology and all the different disciplines throughout, at least in my case, throughout the college campus. So that's really important to kind of talk to our artists about that in our graphic design classes, because they're going to be working with these other brilliant minds when they get into the industry. And so we're going to talk a little bit about, breaking down silos and kind of just some advice as we go. So just the starting point, Adobe is amazing. Again, I'm an Adobe education leader. Angela is as well. Plug for Angela. But it's one of those things that, the tools are really important, but teaching is obviously like building a house. Your foundation being strong and, the layout and the functionality of the house really make the most difference when it comes to teaching. So the tools are important, but whether it's a handheld saw or a power saw, as long as that structure is there, that's the most important thing. So I always start with my students in this kind of analogy, because it's really, really important for them to understand that software is going to evolve and change. But again, a lot of the foundational elements of communication, graphic design, visual storytelling have remained the same since back to the cave paintings, right? So, yes, you can use a handheld saw and build an amazing house, but if you get that power saw too quickly, you can do some damage. And we don't want to do that with our students. So again, foundation and experience is the most important thing when you teach graphic design. Our students, to start, need spaces that are real world learning environments. So if we think about it, what they're used to is some sort of lecture hall or classroom with desks from the K-12 community. These spaces are slowly but surely, with amazing educators, evolving over the years, but they're still very used to that kind of row mentality. Our goal, especially in higher education, when we're developing spaces, is transforming and remixing these spaces into places that best mimic that real world environment. So again, when the first step of teaching is, okay, you want them to be industry professionals, how can we mirror what they're going to encounter? And, advocating for these 21st century spaces is highly important. So anytime we have obviously tech grants or classroom improvement fees, or any opportunity, even here at the University of Central Florida, I'll actually go and talk to the OIR, the Office of Instructional Resources, and they're willing to listen, and they're willing to kind of infuse how do you make the space more ADA accessible? How do you make that space more modular so you can adjust the classroom for the need? These are the spaces our students encounter. So when they get jobs in the real world, They're going to be in mutual open office spaces. This is EA, which is just up the street from us now, a new office in downtown Orlando. Offices like even the Adobe office is kind of a very open format office. These look nothing like our classrooms of old. And so, sure, we may not have a giant mushroom painting in our classroom, but there are little things that we can start infusing and taking from these spaces to hopefully help that student preparation. So again, access to technology, access to all sorts of things. And the fact is too, a lot of our students are going to be working from home. Remote work, not only because of the pandemic, but before the pandemic started, was on the rise. And now my students have to prep to learn how to interview for jobs via Zoom. There's no longer the walk in and do a mock interview face-to-face anymore. We actually do mock interviews through Zoom. So again, advocating for these spaces as educators, which I know we all do, is the first step to teaching. And I always show them this picture. And it's a little intimidating for some of them, but there's the dream and the reality. I teach, again, graphic design and animation. And I have the graphic designers always want to go to, McGowan Berry or some huge, graphic design firm in New York City. But the reality is that takes work. And the realities behind just the technical stuff is, cost of living, how do they, sustain life in New York City? So I encourage them to kind of be realistic with their journey, not so much to change the destination, but just think about the reality of the destination. It's going to be work. It's going to take focus. And sometimes it's going to go a detour in a different path, but, just reminding them that destination will get there. All of this relies on us as graphic design educators to teach them 21st century skills. We rank very low in the United States on students who understand things like critical thinking, creativity, collaboration. Communication is actually the number one skill in surveys from Forbes and all sorts of other companies that any employer wants to see from their people. And when they hire people, it's not necessarily the best practitioner that gets the job. It's going to be the best communicator. And this is so important because I oftentimes see my students getting discouraged when they watch a news story and it says graphic designers, don't go get that job. They're the lowest of the low in the job search. But ironically, again, that graphic was made by a graphic designer. So all of that is really, really, really important. For me, there's a balance between software and design thinking and foundations. And this creative seesaw has to constantly be in motion. Okay, and teaching our students in our classroom both is so vital. Starting with the why is the most important, though. Understanding who they're serving, who's their audience, what is their message, and then what tools, like building a house, are going to be the most efficient for them to communicate that idea and the most practical. So, from an early stage, at least in my teaching of graphic design, our students have professional development courses and they have the ability to do things. And as we know, design is cyclical, and our classroom assignments, I really feel, should be as well. So, this idea of research, ideation, development, and revision, the rinse and repeat mentality, is fantastic. It's something we do when we're professionals in the industry. But unfortunately, in the classroom, we do get stuck in that, I would say, 5 or 6 week project mentality, which becomes, kind of a little bit of a trap for us as educators. And so we'll talk a little bit of ways to break that later in the presentation. Building off of 21st century skills, there's something called the creative habits of the mind. And these are basically, it was basically a study done that, they surveyed teachers and they said, what are the most important factors that you want in your student? Now, these are not just art teachers. These are teachers of all different subjects. They wanted inquisitive, imaginative, disciplined, persistent, and collaborative students. So I always show this because I always want educators of all types and all subjects to look at this and go, that's fantastic. I think we can all agree. But do my projects really have opportunities for each of these to be explored? That's the first step in a good enriching curricular development. It doesn't mean, hey, I need to have a massive group project, but are there opportunities for them to discuss their project with their peers? Are there opportunities for them to get feedback or critique from someone who is completely outside their discipline? That's another thing that doesn't occur a lot in the critique world, is for students to kind of go outside and say, hey, you're an engineer. What do you think of my print layout, right? Or you're a business practitioner. What do you think of my print layout? They're going to get raw feedback that can help and sometimes not help, but that's okay because they're going to have to learn how to process that anyway. So when you're in the classroom, using those devices to kind of build rich learning experiences is really important. I still do assignments, I still do projects, I still have kind of those 5-week breakdowns, but the idea is to get them to engage as much as possible. We want the students to have their stories told. We want the students to be able to infuse their own ideas into their projects. And, Tacey Trowbridge, one of the amazing individuals at Adobe, once said, 21st century skills require 21st century tools, and she couldn't be more right. So having the right tool, but more importantly, knowing how to use that tool and when is so important. For my students, it's a scaffolding technique. So in the classroom, I force them to use a pen and paper or a pencil and paper. I force them to ideate, to draw, to brain sketch, to, whatever it may be, take visual notes. I also slowly introduce tech to them as well. And sometimes using a cool program like Adobe Express even gives you the opportunity to kind of, not so much limit, because some of our students are so used to these massively amazing programs like Adobe Photoshop and all these buttons. But by giving them limits, it's going to allow them to focus more on the why and get that idea out. And I always try to use these softwares with the idea that we want to eliminate what I call the dwell factor. When our students are on projects, we have all had this, but when they start dwelling on things, right? When they start overthinking something that doesn't even matter in the process, this is where kind of taking this down to low fidelity tools make a huge difference. Then when they're ready, go to the right tool for the right job, right? It's basically like prepping all, cutting the wood and organizing it into smaller chunks. And then when you're ready to build the house, you go to the right tools and build that house. As a teacher, all these projects ultimately should amplify our student voices. We are the microphone, we are not the voice. It is not our message, it is not our idea. Every project I teach when it comes to design has a sub-layer of a common objective that they need to teach, make a flyer, make a banner, make a logo sequence, whatever it may be. But ultimately, the student should have to infuse their own creative why into it to have that ownership. That will create moments, not things. As graphic designers, and especially when our students lean too much on the software side of that seesaw that I showed you earlier, they tend to create stuff. And that stuff doesn't have really important backing to it. So when they build their portfolios, there is a lot of things in their portfolios, but none of it really has meaning. It doesn't communicate. It doesn't explain to the student, why that project was important, what was the outcome, what was the audience. So again, by letting them kind of take a little bit more ownership, it's going to be really, really important to kind of do this. Starting with that why, super important. Every project that you have, start with the why. Figure out, no, don't start with what software I need or what certifications I need. Start with the why and then build and scaffold upward. And then when they get to the point of this is an amazing software, awesome, I'm going to get certified in it, awesome, they're going to have such more of a holistic learning experience than if they were to just make those things. All of which comes down to us as visual designers, and I share this in almost every lecture I give now, visual storytelling is everything. This is an amazing graphic. Stanford did a study where they talked all about how to kind of communicate data, and the ability to communicate data with our students is important. So anytime somebody, if your student's feeling upset that people are telling me not to be a graphic designer, what do? I show them this picture. And I basically say, this is why you're important. This is really your job. It's not how they built it. It's not, about Legos. It's about, the content that it portrays. Power of moments, again, building moments, not things. Your class assignment should check a few boxes. So does it elevate their learning experience? Does it provide insight? Does it give them ownership and pride? And more importantly, again, do they connect with it, or do they see it as a hoop to jump through? Constantly, every year, I look at my evaluations and I go through some of that, we all get them, but some of the fun evaluations. And I go and a few students will leave little tidbits of information about why something was important to them, and more importantly, why it wasn't. And I take that very seriously, and I constantly evolve my class. As I mentioned before, that cyclical design process should happen in our classroom as well. If you have the same assignments that haven't changed in the last 4 years, again, you're not practicing what you're preaching, right? That cyclical design nature should revise, revamp, remix your assignment. For me, it's been a lot of creating things for social media. Our students are leaning toward TikTok and, telling stories through Insta Reels and Insta Stories. That's where the culture is right now. The idea of the storytelling hasn't changed. The idea of the output and how to get it there has. So keeping up to date with that is really important. And ultimately, all of this is, how do we put the human back into design? Again, infusing their stories is going to be really important to do so. Setting up authentic learning spaces, thinking of diverse learning assignments, allowing them to bring their own backgrounds, cultures, viewpoints into their assignments is so important. And more importantly, this just creates authentic moments and authentic design. That authentic design will be successful in the long run. So some ways to do this, we want to think about what we learned during the pandemic. In the pandemic, and I'm kind of hypocritical right now because I'm doing a lecture, but we talked a lot and didn't do a lot, right? And we typically saw what you're seeing in the middle screen here. We just saw black screens, no cameras. Even in a lesson like this, it becomes tough in a lecture like this because everyone's cameras off, everyone's kind of doing their own thing, checking emails, right? Rightfully so. But the idea is, how do we engage them? Just because we covered it doesn't mean they learn it, right? How do you test them on that? How do you put them through challenges? How do you get them to be, again, more hands-on in that? My first piece of advice is actually take yourself out of the system, right? To improve their presentation skills, to create ownership, lecture less, which I have a slide for later, but lecture less. Don't rely on one single delivery method. Give them something in the project that's open-ended, right? So, hey, I need you to make a text, a video, or a podcast, an audio piece. You pick. It's up to you. And you're going to have to explore how to do that. That's going to be really important. This is going to help them flex their adaptability, flexibility, and also build their digital literacy skills to build those 21st century skills. And again, they'll learn the tools. They'll learn all that kind of systems from it. And this goal will help them find their thing, their niche. Teaching graphic design is challenging because we all know, as graphic design or visual design teachers, it's not one thing. You have logo design, print design, motion graphics, you have packaging design. All of it has its subtle nuances, and giving the student the ability to kind of, in each project, implement the part that they feel is like the most, I love packaging design, I'm not a fan of video, that will really help too. Using the technology to inspire, using the technology to elevate, but not making sure the technology does not drive the product, right? So even though I use 3D printers with my team to make these bionic arms, we have adapted that to kind of use a printer and then use some other technology to kind of even streamline it further, because 3D printers take a long time to print. So we've kind of sped up that system and that process. My typical project cycle in any of my classes for design is research first, always, right? The lack of all, or the root of all cliche is lack of research. That was actually said by Rob Lowe, of all people, from Parks and Rec and St. Elmo's Fire, all those things. I have them ideate. So before they just look at the research and copy it, which is a challenge for all of us design teachers, I have them draw 50 to 100 ideas in a time limit, in 30 minutes, an hour. always. This helps them break the cycle of mimicry and also combine and remix other designs rather than just regurgitate them. At that point, they can refine it. They can add detail, they can go through and process it. And then the final part is the most important part, because it's something as a student I never had my teachers do. We usually had critique and then never talked about it again. But reflection is so important. And I don't mean reflection through critique. I mean having the students have opportunities to think about their project, have them do a pre-course or a pre-project reflection, a mid-project reflection, and a post-project reflection, and then have them sit there and give them time to say, okay, what was the result? What didn't you think was possible in the beginning that you now realize, oh, I was way off on that. There's a misconception. I now know how to do this. That's where the learning actually occurs. It's not necessarily in the research, ideation, refinement stage. It's in that reflection stage. I love self-reflections, and I use Canvas. That's our LMS at our school. I use that a lot, and we use web course reflections. I have them write little paragraphs. You can have them take a video of just talking to their camera, basically saying, hey, this is what I learned. This went well, and this is what didn't go well. Lecturing in shorter sessions, again, hypocritical for me here because I'm chatting away, but don't simply walk them through a software. Scaffold it, build little chunks, build hands-on experiences, get them in groups, have them collaborate. Again, the live lectures should really be about your experiences, not this is what you could also learn on YouTube, but I'm going to just regurgitate it. Again, practice what you're preaching, because we typically, again, as instructors, don't do this. Having a lot of low risk activities will reduce the failure, hands down. The students will not be afraid to fail. Now, I don't know about you all, but and I love to see this in the chat, but my students are now terrified of getting anything. Like if they get a C, they feel it's an F. Does anyone have that experience? Like you give them a C and it's average and it looks really good, but they're like, oh my God, I failed. And you're like, you didn't fail, you got a C, that's okay. So Chris, yeah, this happens to me all the time. So one thing I've done with that, if you have the opportunity to teach a live lecture, is in my case, I put an assignment where they had to write basically a tweet. And in their tweet, they had to tell me, and what is it, 180 characters, 230 characters, but they had to tell me what makes them creatively unique. Now, here's the kicker. The majority of my 80 students in my lecture hall had very good aspirations and tweets. They said, everything from, I want to bring animation to life, and I want to inspire people with my designs, which are all very valid things. And some say, I don't know. That is true. I had a few of those as well. So I paraphrased a lot of their messaging, and I put it on a PowerPoint slide and said, raise your hand if you said something like this. Again, the majority raised their hand. The cool thing that happened with that is they in person witnessed what an average is. So out of 80, 70 people raised their hand. And I said, okay, you all are C. You all are the average grade. Was your message bad? They said, no, it means it was good. And I go, I agree. It was really good. Did you kind of set yourself apart? And they said, no, we didn't. And then I had a few extra. I had like one student who worked for Limitless, for instance, who said, I make bionic arms for kids and I make video games to teach them how to use their bionic arms. Only one person raised their hand, and that was the Limitless student. All the students at that point kind of could visualize, oh, that's the A in this project. We're the C, but we don't feel less about ourselves because of it. So it debunked the theory that being average is bad, but it also showed them getting an internship, taking a few extra steps, putting yourself out there allowed them to, be that A exceptional student, but they were all still really good kids. So doing something like that is a great way to kind of handle the I can't take, this teacher's mean, I can't take that C grade category, because we deal with it all the time. And again, my C students are some of my most successful students ever when they graduate. right? I just had one who worked on Pinocchio, the new Disney Plus movie, and he was C's all the way, and I loved him to death, and he's so awesome for it. And Chris is saying I like to show them and tell me how they have improved versus right and wrong. Yeah, it becomes less like you're disciplining them and more like, okay, you're in this batch right now. What would you do to kind of move out into this next group? So absolutely. So ideation we spoke about. Failure, honestly, the fear of failure is much worse than failure itself, bottom line. And once your students learn that, and you give them don't give them 2 projects for the whole semester and say, well, it's 50% each. That's a pretty bad safety net to have, but you'll be able to kind of help each other out. This is another one. And again, in the chat, if you do this in class, but timed design sprints. Does anyone do this? This is kind of fun. So I've never seen more terrified students, and I mean this wholeheartedly, than when you tell them, hey, I need you to design a postcard. You have 30 minutes. I'm going to put a big clock on the TV with a countdown. And if it's not in web courses, when that buzzer goes off, it's a 0. The pop project, there you go. Yeah, they freak out. And the fact of the matter is they've been wired to take 15 weeks, 6 weeks, 5 weeks, 3 weeks for an assignment. And then they get out into the real world and somebody says, hey, can you have this in the next 3 hours? And they're like, I can. And it's really bad, right? And so this teaches them that, I always tell them you're not as good as your best work. You're only as good as your worst work, right? And that worst work will allow you to get a baseline of, I can do this under pressure. I didn't have the time, but I'm going to take accountability. Accountability is really important in my classroom. And I'm going to build that ceiling. I'm going to raise that ceiling. And so by doing these over and over, and I have a great colleague, Victor Davila, who's my buddy, but he did one of these today. He grabbed the flyer that UCF had made, walked in his student's room, put it down and said, you have 30 minutes, make it better. And, go. And they didn't have time to dwell. They had to react and think. Now, the important part of this is these have to be so low from the grading scale. Like these cannot be 20%, 30% of their grade. These have to be multiple assignments. Each of them, if they do not make the finish line, they'll be okay. Like it'll take like 2 points if off of their final grade. So the important part too, allow them to reflect and say, okay, what worked and what didn't? And you're going to find a lot of them go back and say, well, I didn't know how to use a mask. I thought I did. I'm certified, right? And I didn't know how to use it. I forgot how to use a mask. This actually feeds into your teaching because at that point you say, okay, who else didn't know how to use that mask? Maybe 12 kids raise their hand. You've just found yourself a lesson that they care about learning and they have a reason to learn it now. So it's not just like, oh, they're talking about masks. Why do I have to listen? Oh, no, I need that. I need that. They're going to absorb it better and that ownership is going to be there. So again, it's a fun way. And again, you have to preface it with this is going to be stressful. I'm doing it on purpose. They're very authentic with them when you do this. Those assessments are so important. Again, pre-project, post-project. And I want to give you all a piece of advice. At my college, I have, there's like teaching awards. Do you all have some people have that at their institutions where you apply or you put in a teaching award proposal or document, or you have an end of the year thing that you give your administrator. I have at the start of every graphic design class, I give them a survey that says, on 1 to 10, what are your skills in this program? On 1 to 10, what are your skills with this design technique? I do one in the middle of the semester and one at the end. And at the end, I write one question after all of those. I say, do you know more than when you started my class? I take that data, I put it into those teaching awards, I give it to my supervisor, and that is the supplement for student evaluations. So if your students evaluate you because, hey, this guy gave me a D, I'm going to give him a bad review, you show them these anonymous data of this growth over the semester, and that is truly where learning begins. And that's how you quantify or qualify it to admins who maybe don't teach what you teach. Again, it's straight out of the students' mouths. This is a big slide. I'll give you access to this PowerPoint, but lots of ways to do pre-assessments and post-assessments beyond a web course quiz. Collaboration is going to be really important, obviously. It's the key to innovation in my mind. And I would hope that you all would, again, make learning social, but more importantly, have your students collaborate with people outside of the classroom. We make our graphic designers get hired and get paid doing a freelance project. So they have to go and find someone who needs freelance in their senior year, and they have to do an invoice, a proposal, SOW, all of the stuff that you have to do for an official design assignment, and they're graded on that. So again, get them out. Educational collaboration, the amazing Tim Needles. This is a great resource. I'll let you all, again, when I give you the link, definitely use this. He's a brilliant guy. I found this from Esther Park. She did this in Zoom during the pandemic. She basically had different breakout rooms for different learners. Open rooms, quiet rooms, the quiet room, right? She had the teacher help room, and she would take parts for class and make this happen. There's no reason we can't do this in real life. There's no reason we can't segment our current space. There's going to be some caveats to that. But if you want to step out of the classroom and sit, at one of the benches outside and say, hey, I'm out there. You do your work in the studio. If you want to come talk to me on my laptop, it's a more casual, more vulnerable conversation. So she is amazing. I have learned most of my teaching practice from K-12 because the K-12 teachers, God bless them. I learned this through the Adobe crew. They are juggling so many subjects, so many different types of learners, so many under-resourced environments, classrooms, materials, you name it, that they have found ways to thrive. So I follow a ton of them on Twitter. I just absorb like a sponge those things. Another one, this is a pun, the worst method is having your students come up with the worst possible ideas first. This is a great psychological trick. If you have a worry wart in your class, have them say, okay, tell me all the bad things that are going to happen with your design before they happen. You'll find that they typically eventually won't happen if they get them out of their system first. The note method, each person writes down as many ideas as possible. You put them on a whiteboard, and then you have the students visually group them. So this is great, again, for ideation, for product, packaging, design. Start to see your students' similarities within and outside of their groups, all really, really important. And then think, pair, share. This is another one that I steal from the K-12 community, but we need to bring that into the 21st century. So what about think, broadcast, share? Think, broadcast, vote, share. What if we had our students, again, take a video and, instead of just sharing a picture, actually talk through the video and put it on YouTube and have the students, respond with video. How do we bring these tools together to kind of build this collaborative environment? I'm a real huge fan of synchronous learning if you've set the environment like I've talked about before. If you've laid your foundation and you build accountability and trust and not no fear, or students are going to be scared all the time, but less fear in your students, asynchronous works. But you have to get them to have that aha moment, that reflection moment, that learning moment. Oh my God, I didn't get an A, but I am learning. I'm getting my money's worth here, right? So some quick resources, and then I want to open it up to questions because I'm chatting too much. Representation absolutely matters. These, I'll give you the PowerPoint, but these are a ton of links in which you can find Creative Commons, disabled in here, Black illustrations. Some are paid, some are free. It is absolutely a necessity to infuse these into your PowerPoints. If you use GIFs, I use a lot of GIFs in my web course. Make sure they're diverse, right? Have the students pick GIFs. I have the students only respond with a GIF, right? And they represent themselves appropriately, and that's important rather than me choosing. The Adobe Education Exchange, great resource. Tons of, you have to dig through it, but tons of awesome Just great curricula for you to download. The education or creative educator group, another fantastic group. Tanya Averith, Rebecca Hare, Claudia. I'm just going to name all our friends, but they're amazing individuals that are passionate about education. That Angela, you can agree with me. You know them. They live and breathe this. They just pure positivity. It's an amazing group. So this is free to join. There's an amazing social media network out there for them. Two great books from two of my inspirations. These Jen Williams and Tim Needles inspire me every day, made me a better educator, and really drive me to lift my ceiling. And then some other books we kind of frequent at Limitless. So definitely, these are all great. I love Lean In. Creativity Inc. is really close to my heart with my animation background. Again, couldn't recommend these more. People to follow, I'm not going to read their names, but I'll give you the PowerPoint link. But they're all there. I could have a whole lecture on just names of people. But the idea is we teach design, and when we were students, we wanted learning to be joyful. We wanted to enhance a new skill. We wanted to promote multidisciplinary collaboration. We want to have happy work. I know it sounds a little cliche, but that's the idea. You want to leave a project happy and fulfilled, even if it's a failure, right? That's the really important thing to do. So I'm going to open it up to questions, but I, can continue to, follow each other, follow the people I recommend, follow me on any of these platforms, reach out. I love collaborating. I love, I'm a sponge as well. So I'm going to, take all of these, the inspiration from all your social medias as well. But for this point, let's answer some questions. So I know, Bill, you had some questions too, which I'll get to as well. So if you may want to redrop those because they got buried in the chat, or I can scroll up. But I see Chris has one. This is apropos because we're in a Certiport conference. I think certification is important. My biggest thing and Chris, you kind of alluded to this, where they don't know what they want to do, or they don't have experience. The hardest part with a graphic designer is if they've never had a freelance project, they've worked at Publix or insert your grocery store where you're from, right? Which is great, professional, part-time job experience. But I tell them there's other ways than having a job to be experienced. Them going to school is a type of experience. Them getting certified is 100% a type of experience, because what that shows is not only that they know their software, but it shows initiative and effort. Extra, right? Whenever all the students who are average raise their hand, the students who took the extra time to get certified because they care about it, that's the exceptional and above average student. So when it comes to certifications, you can have, be very blunt here, and we're talking for Certiport and Adobe, you can have an amazing student who is not certified and be successful. You can have a student who is certified, pass the test, but doesn't really know how to do anything. But the idea is, as teachers, we want to develop that full, complete student who knows the tools, knows when and why to use them, and understands that, again, their communication, their message has the power, right? So yes, certification is important for that. And they are only good for 3 years. And I love that. I think, again, it's cyclical. After 3 years, we forget a lot. And, especially with Adobe and all these other Autodesk programs like that, the software changes. There's software that I used when I was in school that Adobe has infused. Like I remember Muse. I don't know if anyone remembers that, Adobe Muse. But that doesn't exist anymore. They went to XD and now they're going to Figma and they're combining things. And people sometimes get mad at that, but that's okay. That should happen. If design and the tools aren't evolving, it goes back to that picture of the classroom, right? Like wooden desks, it's the same thing. So I'm glad to see these companies evolving. And so keeping them up to date on that certification is important. And for me as an educator, people ask, like, are you certified? Yeah, I get certified too. I'm terrified that I'm going to fail a certification. It will happen one day and it will really make me step up, but it keeps me on my toes and it keeps me, I know that the pulse of these things. And I've worked on writing these certifications too. And there's a lot of people behind the scenes making sure that these questions are relevant and, on the beat of what's happening in the industry. Cool. Good question. It'd be really awkward if I said no, because we're in a Certiport. Any other questions? I'm going to try to scroll up. Bill had asked, do you recommend taking the Photoshop 21 or 22 exam? Honestly, I with the students, take what's accessible to them and available to them. So if they have access to the most new certification, take it. But if they had learned, I know especially in my computer labs, sometimes they're like a year off because the IT has to update them. If they have access to 2021 and that's what they know, and they don't really know 2022, take 2021. A lot of if they're about a year or two apart, they're pretty similar in the questions. Like you don't get really too many curveballs where it's like, that's completely different. Yeah. And let's see. I don't know about the geometrics practice tests. That may be an Emma question, not to put Emma on the spot. But do the geometrics practice question tests work on a Mac?
Yes, I believe they do. I'm just looking right now to confirm for us.
Awesome. And I do know they run on Windows 10 or 11. I remember taking one in Dallas on one. So awesome. That's awesome. 84, Angela, that's amazing. And that's really great, again, when they come in, it's funny, I always equate it, high school is really important. When we go from high school to college, we have to do extracurricular activities, right? We have to build this dossier of things, but our students in higher ed forget that. So when they go from college to the real world, they're like, I don't have any experience. But back in high school, you all put them through the ringer to make sure that they had the exams, the pass rate, everything under the sun. So I point that out to them when they're a senior, and I say, join a club, take an exam, get certified, go through that for sure. IDEO certifications like design thinking. Yeah, I think, Elizabeth, anything for your students that is, again, cost-effective, accessible, that you can, again, manage with all your busy teaching schedules is worth it. No one's going to look at it and say, I'm not going to hire you because you went above and beyond to try to get yourself more experience. So again, a lot of our students aren't going to have the opportunity to go and get an internship at Pixar or an internship at insert design company here, right? That just don't have the means to do that. But some have, I think even all the way down to LinkedIn skills assessments are great. Take a free LinkedIn skills assessment. Know where you're at, get yourself something on your LinkedIn profile. It's valuable, it's experience. It's, again, it helps them get that confidence to then break out of that comfort zone and apply places. Absolutely. So Angela mentioned in the chat, she can schedule 1 hour ahead of time exams, get them in, get them ready to go. Debunking that these exams, the students are going to be nervous because they're new to them. But usually once a student takes an exam, they kind of, they're always like, oh, I want to take this one now. I'm going to go take that one now. They kind of get into that routine. So yeah, they're fantastic. Bill's mentioning about delivery experience. Yeah, so, it all depends where you're at. I know, and I'm spoiled, but I've had some amazing folks at Certiport when I've had any challenges taking an exam. We're right there by my side offering support. I've done it through virtual moderation, where they were a virtual moderator. That was really good too. There's no perfect experience, but I think, understanding that, they have, that this company has your back. And, if something didn't go right, they would be there to talk you through to make it better. Confirmed. Emma has confirmed. Awesome. Geometrics practice test can be downloaded directly on Macs. And all of them except Microsoft Office or Autodesk, but we're doing an Adobe talk so they can, whatever, Autodesk. Don't tell the Autodesk people I said that. Any other questions? What are some, signing up for practical advice on design? Did any of you have any, tips you wanted to share? What are some things you're doing in your classroom to engage and build, to get the students making stuff? What are some things you do? I love the pop-up projects. You have a better branding on it. The sprint, I think pop-up is the way to go. I love that. Do your students, I assume your students panic just as much as ours? Yeah. I tried that with an animation class once and they were like, they didn't know how to handle it. But yeah, that was probably a little much for the animated medium. Yeah, I think, again, just those aren't the big ones. It shows their skills. It shows, again, their realistic skills of what they can and can't do. And all of this comes down to, I keep mentioning the word, but accountability. I give lectures every semester on social emotional learning. Maslow's before Bloom's is so important to me. You must have Maslow's hierarchy of needs fulfilled before you can learn. They need to think about their well-being. I make a habit of not letting my students, or I won't respond to comments that are made anywhere between the hours of 1 a.m. or like typically around 4 a.m. They take pride in procrastination. We all know this, but they're hurting themselves when they're not trying to sleep. Now that's situational. We do have students who work night shifts or they communicate to that me otherwise. Angela does a Halloween corpse project for 3 students. They collaborate to build parts of a corpse and put it together. That's cool. Very apropos. We're doing I teach a professional development class on Halloween this year. And we're doing a combination of let's make a deal in the dating game, but instead it's the professional match game where the one student has to interview blindly 3 students, like in that same format. And we're going to all be in costume. So we're really excited about that. It will look a little weird, me walking around school in costume. Any other questions? Oh, PowerPoint link. Yeah, good call. Bill, you're keeping me accountable here. I appreciate you. This is the PowerPoint link, and I'm going to honestly make sure I share it because I didn't. I think it's the same link. Paste it again. Again, that's my social media. You can find me typically on Twitter or not really on Instagram a ton, but LinkedIn for sure. And if there's no other questions, it was really great chatting with you all today. It's good to see you, Angela. Long time. It's pre-pandemic in our AEL conferences. Thanks, Emma, for being the ace there and grabbing all the technical requirements.
Will you be at Adobe Max?
I will not. I have a beautiful 8-month-old little baby and a very rambunctious 3.5-year-old. So this particular year, I'm gonna wait I think next year will be okay. How about yourself? Are you going?
I'm going to be there, and I have some an educator luncheon survey talking about how they're going to ask me, how Adobe can help educators, with issues and going. So I'm really looking for more diversity, equity, and inclusion projects. I want resources. I mean, I have to create programs, do the curriculum, submit it all, set up all of my outreach stuff. I mean, so much. So I want to have a resource that's really fantastic.
But do you know Jen Williams?
Not by name.
No, I would definitely, and I'm going to pull, I'm still screen sharing. Good. Jen Williams wrote Teach Boldly, Jen is an advocate, not only, and obviously with diversity and inclusion, there's a lot of subsets that you would want to focus on, but Jen is an advocate of connecting community and connecting worldwide doing projects like this. So she has the Climate Action Project where she brings, educators from rural Africa. She finds a way to bring them on Zoom, and she's done comic book projects with these folks and talking about cultures and inclusion through illustration. I'd be happy to make that introduction for you. And I'm going to find the list of people you should know. If you are a Twitter user, did I put Jen here? Yeah, it's at Jen Williams EDU. Jen is a Florida-based educator as well, but I think you two would have a fantastic conversation. I get chills when I think of Jen. She's amazing. She's like this energy that, Jen's like, oh yeah, we only had like 46 countries do this. I'm like, wait, what? But she will definitely be able to connect you. She's really big in the ITSE community. I think she's on the board for them and things like that. So hopefully that helps. But if you need a more formal introduction, and I think we're connected, but I will drop my regular email. I would be happy to help with that. So that's my email in the chat. And have fun at Max too.
Thank you.
That'll be great. Bill, I think maybe Emma can help on this one. Bill's asking about a Certiport testing center that support Max. And can you please provide a list of the Max supported? List specifying the Max supported. So Emma, I may have, maybe Bill can ping you.
Yeah, absolutely, Bill. If you want to ping me your email address, I can provide you all that helpful information after the webinar today.
I don't want to give you the wrong information, Bill. I'm just that graphic design teacher from UCF. I could try to find it for you, but I don't want to, send you in the wrong direction. Awesome. All right. Well, I'll see you all later. Have a great week, almost the weekend, and enjoy the rest of the sessions today. Thanks, Emma.
Thank you, Matt.
Thanks, Matt.
Hi. Thanks, Angela. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
So I think it's really important for teachers.
Yeah, I agree. I think that there's a lot that goes into, and web design, I'm glad that you were willing to step in and do that, because I know that's a really complicated one for a lot of teachers too. So we appreciate you doing that. Yeah. You're welcome to drop off, Jenny. I think we're about done for the day. So unless you want to hang out or try to jump into Brad's session. I think we should be good.
No, I'm gonna leave him alone.
Okay.
I gotta run and get stuff, and Lily, you can hear her. She's antsy right now, so she's ready to go.
Awesome. Thanks, Jenny. We appreciate you. I'll talk to you later.
Bye.
Bye.
All right, bye.
Hi, Angela. Our web design session is wrapped up. You're welcome to drop off from here. We've pretty much had people just leaving from their breakout rooms. So if you had any questions for the Certiport team, though, we're happy to answer those. But it looks like most of the sessions are finished up for the day. So
great. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you for joining us. We appreciate you. Hey, Emma, how did your session go?
It went very well. I had a couple individuals to follow up on regarding how they can use Max with different Adobe softwares.
So okay, awesome.
I'll follow up with that. Matt was lovely and shared his slides. Do you have those as well, or do you?
So Jenny didn't have any slides. She was just working from a screen share. So we'll just have the recording for her.
Okay.
And I think the same for Brad. So if you have Matt's ready to go, I'll get the recordings posted for all three. And then I think we should be all set.
Okay, awesome.
And you're welcome to drop off. I'll just stay in here for a couple more minutes so that when we have Brad's session finish up, if anyone pops into here, we'll be ready to let them know that we'll send out the recording soon. But if you're good to go, I'll send those to you a little bit later this afternoon.
Awesome. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Emma. I appreciate you.
Bye.
Bye.